Today, President Trump announced that he was pardoning Susan B. Anthony, who you probably know from the women's suffragette movement, because she was fairly instrumental in pushing for women to have the right to vote. Today also marks the 100th anniversary of the passing of the 19th Amendment, the amendment which actually gave women the right to vote back in 1920. And so by highlighting someone who was instrumental in the women's suffragette movement, he kind of nodded both at the work that she did, but also the passing of the 19th Amendment more generally. Now, the reason that she was eligible to be pardoned in the first place was because back in 1872, she was arrested for voting. This was 5 decades before women had the right to vote, so what she did was essentially illegal, so she was arrested and fined. We'll see a little bit more about that later. But essentially, she was arrested for voting as a woman. This is what Trump said. She was never pardoned. What took so long? Which is a fairly good point. I mean, this happened almost 150 years ago, 1.5 centuries ago, and she has not yet been pardoned. Now, I understand that at that point, a pardon is significantly more symbolic than anything else. It's not as if she is somehow still here suffering because she was arrested, because she obviously isn't. But to some, the symbolism is still fairly important. Susan B. Anthony, however, was not just an advocate for women's right to vote. She was also a champion of abolition, the rights of labor, and equal pay for equal work. And as I said previously, she was arrested in 1872 because she voted, and that was illegal at the time, which is a pretty awesome way to protest. Contrast that to what we see today, where people are literally burning down buildings, stealing and rioting, and I think she kind of understood it better than they do. So all around, she seems like a pretty great person, so this pardon is warranted. Now obviously, there are going to be those who highlight the fact that this is an election year, and so Trump is likely just doing this to try and get more support and get more votes, especially from those who are women. But even if that's the case, you could say it's a political stunt, or you could say that he's just doing this for a good image, but at the same time, it's still a good thing that happened. Even if you don't think his reasons are just, it's still not bad, especially considering the fact that just like every other politician, he is looking out for himself and for his reelection. Let's not pretend that Obama or any other politician doesn't care about getting reelected. Especially in an election year, they go out of their way to try and do things to make themselves look better than they actually are. That did not stop the media, however, from pretending that Trump is uniquely evil in this respect, and that he doesn't really care, he's just doing this for any number of weird reasons. Looking at CNN, for example, they contrasted him pardoning Susan B. Anthony with an attack that he had on Michelle Obama. That's the word they use. So what exactly was this attack? Last night, Michelle Obama gave a speech at the Democratic National Convention. And so Trump, in response to this speech, said the following. Well, she's in over her head, and frankly, she should have made the speech live, saying that her speech was extremely divisive. And so that, according to CNN, constitutes an attack on Michelle Obama, which somehow discredits the fact that he just pardoned Susan B. Anthony, I guess is the line of thought here, because that's what they say. Trump celebrates women's rights and attacks Michelle Obama, essentially saying you shouldn't be criticizing a political opponent who's a woman at the same time that you are trying to champion women, I guess. Vox had a different take, essentially downplaying the importance of the 19th Amendment. Now, they highlighted correctly that the 19th Amendment focused mostly on white women, that in theory it did apply to all women, but there are significant barriers for women of color that stop them from voting in most cases, just like there were for men of color. Even though they had the right to vote technically, in practice it was a lot more difficult than that. Even with that being the case, the 19th Amendment was still a really big deal when it passed. Yes, it should have applied more equally to everybody, and people of color should have been able to vote at that time, if not earlier. I certainly agree with that. However, it's still a pretty big deal they allowed white women, at least, to vote. That's a step in the right direction. No, it's not enough, but it's a step. And then we have this article from the Daily News saying that we still have voting inequities. Now, when I saw that article, I thought maybe they were going to highlight, I don't know, a disparity in voting between men and women or something like that, but they don't. All they do is highlight this individual called Mason, who last presidential election voted, even though she technically wasn't allowed to because she had just gotten out of prison, and so she was rearrested and is now currently in prison again. The gist of this article is saying that Mason was snubbed because she's currently in prison, and instead of pardoning her, Trump pardoned someone who's already dead. So like I said, it's okay if you think that Trump did this for his own benefit. Even if that's the case, it still doesn't necessarily make this a bad thing. Politicians are always looking out for how to get reelected. Trump's not the first one to do this. But if you were to listen to the media, he's essentially the first one to ever do it, and that makes him so uniquely and inherently evil. All in all, I think what the media should do is recognize that this is actually a good thing. That it's a fairly good way to celebrate the 100th anniversary of passing the 19th Amendment, which is allowing women to vote. What better way to celebrate that than to pardon someone who is instrumental in that right? So Susan B. Anthony seems like a good choice to me. But the media will get even more and more negative as time goes on because that's essentially all they do. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.